Hello dear chess enthusiasts and welcome back to our exciting journey through the world of chess. This video is episode 2 of our series Grandmasters vs Amateurs. And in this video we are going to take a look at the game played by the good Bulgarian Grandmaster Peter Arnaudov against an untitled opponent. On the right side you can see Arnaudov's FIDE profile. Also the picture is from the FIDE's page. So he gained his Grandmaster title in 2013, and you might be wondering if Arnaudov hasn't been over 2500, since this is the threshold, which is a requirement to become a Grandmaster. Well, actually he has surpassed this threshold on live lists, which is the requirement for the Grandmaster title, not the official month lists. So it is enough for players to be over 2500 in the mid of October, then drop. But additionally they also need 3 title norms. So the following game was played by Arnaudov and he had the white pieces. Enough talk, now let's go to the game. So as mentioned, white plays the reti, so he starts with knight to f3, and now black has a white choice between d5, c6, like this or this, but black goes for knight f6, and now comes g3. And now we have the reti only after g3, and black here decides to play d5 and bishop to g2. Again, black has a white choice. He can play it with c6, with e6, even with c5 or g6, among other moves like bishop f5 or bishop g4. So you get me, black has a lot of possible setups. And here white is faced with e6 and white castles and bishop to d6 played. This looks a little bit weird because usually the bishop goes to e7, but this bishop to d6 move has been played by very strong players, and especially Blühbaum, the German Grandmaster, rated over 2600, very strong advocate of this variation. And now white has a choice, and as you can see it's constantly a question of which setups both sides choose. White had a lot of possibilities, and now also black, and now it's white again. So white here could play d4, castles, and then c4, and we transpose into a Catalan opening with this bishop on g2, g3, and this very characteristic stuff for the Catalan. And it's not clear if the bishop on d6 is rather good or bad. Usually strong players try to not put it on d6 so early. But let's see what white played in the game, because Arnaudov played d3. So the Grandmaster plays d3, and this is very typical for the reti, just playing a calm position. The alternatives are basically c4 and b3. So d3 played, castles, and now black hasn't committed himself to c5, so it's not sure if white should go for a King's Indian setup with knight bd2. But yeah, he could probably do that. Instead, white played knight to c3. And this looks weird, but this has been actually played by Grandmaster Meshkos from Latvia. And it's a move, it's playable. And this position already is almost non-existent on master level. So it's either master versus amateur or amateur versus master. Yeah, so knight bd7, just developing the knight. And this is still not a novelty. This position still exists according to my database. And now white plays e4. So at some point white must play in the center, and Arnaudov thinks that now it's time. And black plays c6. So now this bishop You could claim that this bishop on d6 makes sense. It might just drop back to b8 at one point, but on the other hand, it's hitting this massive pawn structure. So it's not clear if the bishop on d6 is that well placed, especially because of a detail which we will see in one moment. So white plays rook e1, and this is preparing e5, forking knight and bishop and winning a piece. So black has to deal with it because this square is twice covered by bishop and knight, but also twice defended if the e-pawn is pushed by the knight and the rook. So black has to do something about it, and black decides to go queen to c7. And now white tries to put some more pressure on black, but actually he should have gone for something like a4, winning some space on the queen side, or d4, playing in the center, renewing this threat of playing e5 and forking bishop and knight. But instead, white played bishop to g5. And now what white is doing is he's reinforcing this threat of e5 to a certain extent. So let's see what happens if, after bishop g5, white plays h6. Then bishop takes f6, and the knight cannot recapture because after e5, the e5 pawn is defended twice but only attacked twice. So white has covered it enough times. Black is going to lose a piece, so it's not working. Let's take a look at other moves. So a bishop takes f6, so g takes f6 is forced, and this surely does not work because this pawn structure is just horrible. Yeah? Oh, white is going to win in a couple of moves probably. So let's go back. Instead, black saw this, so he took on e4 once, and d takes e4, and now he played e5. And this is the point where I want to return. Why didn't black play e5 immediately in this position? If he had done this, white could have played e takes d5, knight takes d5, and knight to e4. And now it's not so clear for black if his position is still okay, because this bishop is attacked, this pawn might be weak, this rook is excellently placed, there's also this bishop. Yeah. So this is the reason why black decided to take on e4 first and then play e5. Okay, so e5 played by black, white cannot play it anymore. And white tries to continue by playing knight to h4. And black plays the very principled move h6. And now it's time to decide what to do. So knight f5 was possible because after pawn takes g5, for example, queen takes d6, and this is very unpleasant because suddenly the queen side's changed and this pawn might be a weakness. So let's go back. Instead of knight f5, white chose to play bishop to e3, which is still fine. Then came knight b6 and now h3. And after knight c4, you get the feeling, or at least I got the feeling, that white is being outplayed positionally, because this knight on c4 is already very annoying. So suddenly the bishop has to go back to c1, which is a fine move in many positions, but usually this a rook is already on d1 then, when the bishop goes back to c1. So develop all the pieces, then you still can retreat with the bishop to the back rank. But here it's not possible. So bishop b4 played, and now the question is how to defend this knight on c3, and white decided to play queen to f3. So now it's covered, no double pawns. If there were double pawns here, this knight would be a monster. But fortunately for white, the position is still a little bit different. So now, after queen f3, black plays queen to e7, and white plays a3. And it's obvious that you don't want to take on c3 with the black pieces. So just draw back to a5. b6 might be a much better square. Then put some pressure along this diagonal. So white plays b3, then came knight to d6, and something which we can see is the superb control of black over the f5 square. So this knight is basically worthless. And now comes a very difficult decision. Where to put this bishop on c1? To b2 or d2? Here or here? In the game, Arnaudov decided to play bishop to d2, and black just retreated with his bishop to c7. Also providing some additional cover for the e5 pawn. White played not good here. He should have gone for bishop e3, just improve the bishop, because this knight is not attacked anymore after bishop c7. So bishop e3, or also another move which is far simpler is queen e2, because let's say black plays g5, then comes knight f3, and white is completely fine, maybe already fighting for some advantage, because the structure is just bad, especially on the king side. So let's just go back. a4 was played, and now comes a move which white might have missed, and this is g5. After g5, there is only one square for the knight, and this is f5. And here, black took a very interesting decision, or made a very interesting decision. He can either take with this knight on d6 or with the bishop on c8. The bishop on c8 has not been developed yet, and the knight on d6 is covering or attacking e4, but it's rather covering, because after bishop takes f5, e takes f5, black can play e4, and now we see the pawn is covered by the knight on d6. And white could have sacrificed on e4 with knight takes e4, knight takes e4, rook takes e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop takes e4. And what we see here is that black is up in exchange, but white has 7 pawns and black has 6 pawns. So there is a compensation, some form of compensation, but it's questionable if it is enough in the long run. Instead, white played queen to e2, which isn't a good move either. It's very hard to find good moves here if they exist. So black just plays very slowly. He first defends the e4 pawn. But why? Because after knight takes f5, knight takes e4, knight d6, knight takes d6, queens are exchanged. Suddenly it's white who is better, because the position has some elements of an open position, and white has the pair of bishops. So this factor is very important in these kind of positions, and the white should be better here. So that's why black didn't want to opt for this position. So first, rook f e8, defending the e4 pawn, a fourth time. It's 4 times attacked, 4 times defended, so enough defended. And now we can see what white is doing. He's playing g4, and g4 is severely weakening this diagonal. So black just goes queen to e5, as mentioned, this diagonal, and there is also this bishop which is supporting the queen, and there is also some pressure on the c3 knight, so the bishop cannot move. So white prophylactically plays king to f1, then follows bishop to b6, and now comes the last mistake of white, rook ac1. He should have gone for rook ad1 and have fought for the center. Instead, rook ac1, rook ad8. Now you can see black is completely developed, has almost a dream position. Maybe you can argue that this knight is not perfectly placed. It might be better on c5 and the bishop on c7, but black's position is very good while white has issues. The pieces are developed but on bad squares. So rook ed1, and now comes a devastating move, e3. Completely ripping apart the defensive capabilities of white, because the bishop is still pinned to d2 or e1 because it wants to defend the knight on c3, so the bishop cannot take. Otherwise just queen takes and black is up a piece. And there is also this pin, so worse position, down materia, not good for white. So the only playable move looks like to be f takes e3, but even here black can increase the pressure against this knight with bishop to a5. And now white has an issue because these knights are ready to jump into d5. E4. So queen e1 was played, defending this knight on c3 a second time, and now white's position is very bad, no activity almost. So black plays aggressively on the king side with h5. He achieved everything in the center and on the queen side, so he just continues on the king side, creating new weaknesses. And if white took, then knight takes, and suddenly we have just another weakness. Oh, not good. So white plays e4, h takes g4, and the pawn is gone. Queen e3, and now black could have taken h3 and everything would be fine. After queen takes g5, king f8, queen h6 check, king e7, queen takes h3, everything is fine. King side is completely open, and the rooks are going to join the attack. So very difficult position. Let's go back. Instead, black played king f8 immediately before taking on h3, and queen takes g5, pawn takes h3, same position basically. So bishop f3 is played here, and now black just walks away with the king, king to e7, and it's also covering the knight on f6. Bishop f4, sacrificing a piece, queen takes c3, and now there comes a move which black should have seen in advance, and it's rook d3, but black indeed had, because he played knight d takes e4, attacking the queen. So bishop takes e4, rook takes d3, c takes d3, and now we see that queen b2 looks very ugly, taking control over the second rank. White has the pair of bishops, but it's of no use. So, very difficult position for white. Oh, completely lost. Queen h4, and now comes rook g8. The rook is joining the attack, and the game is basically finished. After bishop g5, rook takes g5, queen takes g5, bishop d2. White decided to resign here. I hope you enjoyed the video and the game. If you want to see more of such videos, feel free to subscribe. Also, there is the Grandmasters versus Amateurs playlist if you want to watch explicitly these videos. See you. Bye.